Hi guys, thanks for joining me in part 2 of the most probable date of the crucifixion of Jesus, that fatal Passover, and what it means for us with this Passover in 2024. If you haven't watched part 1, I'll leave a link in the probably the comments section. It's probably best that you watch that first, so you get the full picture of what's going on, and you would have missed out on a lot of information verifying the date, possible date, most probable date of 33 AD. This is the Julian calendar in Israel, thanks to timeanddate.com, and some added information. So, in the first part, we explored geophysical evidence of earthquakes and recorded eclipses, and from scripture we can now verify days of the week with the calendar, key characters, and a timeline of events with an explanation for the hours of darkness. When you read the chapters which are relevant to the crucifixion in the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, the whole story can be pieced together. So we're going to have a look at them now. I hope they're still in order. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? Okay, so the Feast of Unleavened Bread begins, it's a 7-day feast, begins with the Passover. When that evening came, he sat down with his 12. They ate their Passover, commonly known as the Last Supper. This was the Thursday evening and the true Passover date. The Jews had their Passover feast on Saturday, regardless of the date commanded in Exodus. And when they had sung a psalm, they went out into the Mount of the Olives. And that was the same night. Jesus said unto them, All ye shall be offended by me this night, for it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered. But after I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. But Peter answered and said unto him, Though that all men should be offended by thee, yet will I never be offended. But Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this night before the cock crow thou shalt deny me thrice. Peter said unto him, Though I should die with thee, I will in no case deny thee. Likewise also said all of the disciples. And it was still the same night. And Jesus went with them to a place which is called Gethsemane, and said unto his disciples, Sit ye here while I go and pray. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away again and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Each time he returned, they were asleep. And he came to his disciples and said unto them, Sleep henceforth and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is given into the hands of sinners. Meanwhile, before that night, Satan entered into Judas, and he went his way and communed with the high priests and captains how he might betray him to them. because he was upset at the waste of an expensive oil that they could have made money on. Anyway, the priests were happy to give him money in return for Jesus. So he thought about the most opportune way to betray Jesus while the people were away, and the footnote for away, without tumult, unwitting to the people which used to follow him, and therefore indeed they watched their time, when they knew he was alone in the garden. So there wouldn't be a fight, because the other disciples were unaware and not next to Jesus to defend him. So while Jesus prayed and the other disciples slept, Judas left and led the soldiers to him. No doubt Jesus knew what was going to happen. And as the multitude approached him, he said, "Ye be come out as it were against a thief, with swords and staves to take me. I sat daily teaching in the temple among you, and you took me not. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. And they took Jesus and led him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. And Peter followed afar unto the priest's hall, and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. The whole council sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death. So Peter ended up denying that he knew Jesus 3 times, and then immediately the cock crowed. So now it is morning, Friday the 3rd of April, still the 14th of Nisan. Then Pilate called together the high priests and the rulers and the people, and said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverted the people, and behold, I have examined him before you, and have found no fault in this man of those things whereof ye accuse him. No, nor yet Herod, for I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done of him. I will therefore chastise him and let him loose. Because it was a Jewish tradition to let a criminal loose on the Passover Saturday. And this day that this is happening was a Friday, which they didn't call Friday in those days, but the preparation day. Then all the multitude cried at once, saying, Away with him! Which for certain insurrection made the city, and murder was cast into prison. This Barabbas that they'd preferred to be freed instead of Jesus. Then Pilate spake again to them, willing to let Jesus loose. But they cried, saying, Crucify, crucify him. And it was the 3rd hour when they crucified him, which is around 9 a.m, 3rd hour after dawn. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was a darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. So that's from midday to 3 p.m. And the sun was darkened. And Jesus cried with a loud voice and said, Father, into thine hands I commend my spirit. And when he thus had said, he gave up the ghost. Jesus needed to be buried pretty quickly because it was Friday, the preparation day before their holy Sabbath, when they held Passover. So the darkness that happened from midday for about 3 hours. It's been speculated that it was due to a dust storm or sandstorm, which is common in the southern Israel at spring if it hasn't rained yet, and can last for hours. And I found this article in the Washington Post online. Time after time in biblical history, scholars wrote that the sun turned to darkness while Jesus died on the cross, and the moon to blood just after he died. The Oxford scientists say the sun turned to darkness April the 3rd, 33 AD, because, according to accounts in Roman literature, a massive dust storm occurred that day. So much dust was spewed out into the air from the storm that it caused the moon to look blood red when it became visible to Jerusalem residents late in the day. So, as Jesus was dying, he cried again with a loud voice, and then yielded up his ghost. So, there's different ideas about this, what it means, but I'm feeling that yielding up the ghost, his spirit was freed, obviously. And then verse 51, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the stones were cloven. So I'm thinking that the veil is actually his human body. The temple is Jesus himself. And to be rent in twain means to be torn into two parts, which is the physical and the spirit. So at the time of his death, his power was released, which caused the earthquake and the stones to be split. So my understanding of that comes from John chapter 2, because a veil is to conceal and disguise. John chapter 2 says, Then answered the Jews and said unto him, What sign showest thou unto us that thou doest these things? And they didn't believe that he is the Son of God. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up again. And he spoke of the temple of his body. So I'm putting that together with this, that his body, his spirit was torn from his physical body, which was a veil of his full self. That's just my thought. But the common understanding of the veil being torn is literally a huge wall hanging in the temple being torn in two. Joseph Flavius wrote that it was so heavy that horses tethered to each side couldn't pull it apart. The curtain was suspended from a lintel, and it's likely that the earthquake displaced the lintel and the support pillars, which would have resulted in the curtain being torn. The timing of the event is extraordinary, as Matthew recorded that it happened at the very moment Jesus died. And I expect that, it could be both here. The earthquake happening at the time of Jesus' spirit being released from his physical body, which was a veil and a disguise of his true self, his true power. the last thing that implies the crucifixion taking place on a Friday is that the Jews had to get rid of the bodies because it was their preparation day on the Friday. See, it's got a capital P there, which means it's important. That the bodies should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath was a high day, being their Passover. And again down to verse 42, John 19, because of the Jews' preparation day. So it's mentioned twice there, which is a big hint. So what does all this mean for us now? If Passover is a high watch date for you, then I reckon we have a bit more time here to endure and help get people to know Jesus.